Oh! Three, two, one, go! Hello, fellow people of the digital world. This is the Tiefling of Trouble, Jenny Blaze, and happy Halloween, everybody! So, we've covered vampires, witches, demons, and ghosts. And now we come to my favorite Halloween monster of all time, werewolves. And let me tell you, there is a lot to go over with werewolves. But I guess we can start off with where their sort of origin comes from. And a lot of it, the weird thing is that with werewolves, there's this whole thing of, like, this curse of being a werewolf, this fight between man and wolves. But, to be honest, when you look at the ancient werewolf connections, there's not really a lot of that to there. Like, sure, there's the whole turning into a wolf thing, but I think the only time when it's portrayed in sort of a negative context in ancient Greek is with King Lycaon of Arcadia. With the fact that he basically tricked Zeus and then was turned into a wolf as punishment. But then again, Zeus was all about turning other people into animals. Honestly, all the Greek gods were. It's kind of their whole dealio, but it's like, that seems to be the only time when it really does happen. But other than that, I feel like werewolves being bad guys only really started up around the time when, I think it started up around the time when there was a whole Christian doctrine of God did not make these miracles and these are monsters created by Satan or stuff like that. Thank you, Heinrich Kramer, for being a total asshole. God. I feel like it seems like every 2 weeks I'm like, I wish that this certain source was not incredibly racist and sexist and homophobic and transphobic and all of that stuff. And it's just kind of like, it just goes to show the world that we live in, where it's like, I really wish that these people didn't do these things. I want there to be actual, like, can we just get along and stuff like that, but everybody has to have their own opinions about things. Admittedly, I also have my own opinions about things, but I'm getting off track here. But yeah, basically werewolves were painted as, like, being these cursed beings that were touched by the devil and stuff like that, and a lot of that kind of just ties into how wolves have been seen throughout history. Of people don't really understand wolves a lot. They think that they are monstrous and they just eat sheep and stuff. I mean, there's so many wolf sort of things like Boy Who Cried Wolf and, the Big Bad Wolf and stuff like that. But honestly, like, here's the thing, wolves are pretty chill. I think that nowadays in our modern sensibilities, we have learned that wolves, they can be territorial and they can attack humans, but much like with other animals, it's probably the dumb human's fault if they end up getting attacked by a wolf, you know what I mean? And it's like, I think that that's kind of shaped a lot of modern-day werewolf interpretations, where it's like, initially it's like, oh, werewolves are scary and stuff like that, whereas, like, nowadays it feels like werewolves have a lot more of a nice chill place in our modern media, in a sense. But one thing that I do find interesting is where the whole idea of werewolves biting or scratching a person, transmitting the curse, comes from. Because looking at all of the different sources, and by all the different sources I mean I read from Overly Sarcastic Productions video on Werewolves. Yes, I know, fake fan, I should be doing my own research, but at the same time, it's like... honestly, I'm a little bit worried if this video will actually come out on time, because I've been busy with both of my jobs and all of stuff like that. Full transparency there, but a lot of werewolf stuff kind of seems to come from Dracula, for as weird as it sounds, because in the original novel, Dracula was able to, like, turn into a wolf, not just a bat. And I think I talked about this initially in the vampire video of, like, you know, we have Dracula turning into a bat and a wolf and Mist, which is kind of where Alucard gets those transformations in Symphony of the Night. And I think that's because, like, connecting Dracula turning into a wolf to werewolves turning into a wolf, that they're like, oh, if a werewolf bites you, you turn into a werewolf too, and it's interesting how that sort of logic kind of mixes in with how werewolves are portrayed. But this also kind of brings up an interesting thing of, like, the whole being the wolf versus being the man, and the whole, like, do you give in to your primal instincts, or do you try to be more human, essentially? And I feel like one way that that has been implemented outside of werewolves is surprisingly in Marvel with the Incredible Hulk. Like, think about it. Man gets transformed into a monster that he has a loose way of, like, inadvertently getting transformed into. Like, with the Incredible Hulk, it's anger. With wolves, it's the moon, or it could also be anger. I've seen, like, werewolves getting angry and transforming into their wolf form being a thing that happens in modern werewolf stories. And then the whole thing of, like, there's a lot of angst behind Bruce Banner being the Hulk. And it's honestly kind of interesting, because basically the Incredible Hulk kind of took away the whole angsting of being a werewolf. And I find that kind of interesting, because it kind of... because of how the Incredible Hulk has been so integral to our modern media, it kind of caused a bit of a shift in werewolves, in a sense. Like, now it's more about the relationship between wolf and man, rather than the relationship between man and monster, essentially. And honestly, I do really like that. Nowadays, we got a lot of werewolves that, you know, could be considered werewolves, but aren't werewolves. Like, for example, we look at Link from Twilight Princess and his ability to turn into a wolf when exposed to the Twilight Realm. We have Sonic the Werehog and Sonic Unleashed, of how he is able to turn into this werehog creature at night because of stuff in that game, but at the same time, Sonic isn't really a werewolf, I guess, or he's a hedge wolf. Sonic the Werehog's confusing, not gonna lie. And then one of my personal favorites is the Beastkin from Fire Emblem. Now, mainly this stems from Fire Emblem Awakening with the character Pan. I really love Pan. She's a very fun character, and I remember when I was playing Awakening, just her being a very interesting character, and just her whole thing of being, like, this last of her kind. Also, her beast form is really cool, because it's a giant rabbit, and yes, I know that that's not a werewolf, and if you wanted to be more technical, like, we didn't really get werewolves until the Wolfskin from Fire Emblem Fates, but we're not talking about Fire Emblem Fates, we're talking about a better game, we're talking about Awakening. I mean, there's also the Laguz. I don't know if there's a Wolf Laguz, I never played the Radiance duology, so Pan is what we're going with here, and I really value her as a character, of just kind of, just being, like, outside of her just being a werebunny, just her, like, kind of aloof nature, and eventually warming up to the party. Very wolf-like behavior, to be honest, of, like, wolves being this aloof and serious, don't need no other people around me sort of thing, you know, your standard Lancer tsundere type. And then growing closer, you know, it's kind of like Shadow the Hedgehog, to bring another Sonic comparison in there. But yeah, I think that one way that, like, the whole wolf versus man debate can kind of play into its logical extremes, though, is with a certain character that I've only really interacted with in bits and pieces, but I do really love this character's design and just their personality, and that is John Talbane from Darkstalkers. Like, Kung Fu werewolves, guys. It's really interesting. And, like, you compare this to a character like Saberwolf from Killer Instinct, which doesn't really have too much to him outside of, oh, he's just a werewolf. And then you add John Talbane and it's like Kung Fu werewolves, guys. Like, that's cool. That's honestly really cool. And I kind of find just John Talbane interesting because basically, like, you know, it's a whole bloodline thing, and he wanted to basically train his mind so that he didn't fall to his primal urges and stuff like that. So he trained in Kung Fu. That's an interesting way of going about it, just being like, I train my spirit and body in order to prevent myself from losing full control of my werewolf instincts, essentially. Like, I don't know. Admittedly, a lot of this is just me kind of like, how do you say it? Just fangirling. Honestly, that's what Monstober has been this whole time, is just me fangirling about some of my favorite, well, basically favorite members of a category of monster, and just being like, yeah, these are just really cool and stuff. Anyways, I want to give a small honorable mention, a small dishonorable mention. The honorable mention I want to give to is Wolfwalkers. I only know a little bit about Wolfwalkers, but the way that they portray it, and they portray, like, that these are basically werewolves of Celtic mythology and stuff like that, and having a bunch of really interesting lore from what I have seen. I really need to watch Wolfwalkers, because it's just, like, the appeal of it just seems very fun and interesting. However, for my dishonorable mention, I have to go back to mentioning Twilight, because unlike with vampires, where I'm just like, ugh, why do they sparkle and stuff like that, and just like, there are some legit problems that I have with Stephenie Meyer's Werewolves, is like, it seemed like people were starting to be more attached to Jacob, and so Stephenie Meyer's like, well, I can't have that. We need to have Bella with the boy toy Edward. So what we're going to do is we're going to make vampires look so much cooler in comparison by making the werewolves worse, by basically adding in grooming, and also make Jacob a total asshole. If people ask me why I have a problem with Stephenie Meyer, it is mainly because of how she kind of ruined my favorite monsters. Like, just, I don't know. Admittedly, I'm getting to just complaining and stuff like that. It's just, the whole werewolf imprinting thing is just so stupid. So incredibly stupid. But finally, to get to our final topic of here, let's go from a bad story that I hate to a bad story that I like, with an old Nickelodeon movie called The Boy Who Cried Werewolf. And honestly, I do feel like this is a very interesting little full circle, because we started this by talking about My Babysitter's a Vampire, which was on Disney, and now we're talking about one on Nickelodeon that has Victoria Justice. And basically, this is the story of Victoria Justice becoming a werewolf and stuff like that. And honestly, I really like how this movie is. Like, it's not a good movie, but it is an interesting movie, of the idea of just, like, Victoria Justice gets infected with werewolf blood and starts turning into a werewolf. She stops wearing her glasses, and her, like, allergies disappear because she's become all wolf-like and stuff, and, like, physical strength and whatnot. But I think I like the way that, even outside of how she is in the wolf form, that we get to see some really cool werewolf powers, and, like, we see that there's a bit of enhanced strength and agility, in a sense, and it's, like, kind of like that. I kind of think that it's really cool, and I like that they introduce all of this werewolf lore of them being the guardians of this one town, essentially, and that they are the mortal enemy of vampires, which always seems to be a thing of just, yeah, werewolves and vampires kind of hate each other. Hey, maybe that's why I put them on opposite sides of the month. Also, they have a very fun and interesting little joke at the end of the movie where they're basically like, hey, so Britney Spears was a werewolf, apparently. It's like, I don't know why. That joke just always gets to me, of just Britney Spears being a werewolf and them just ending the movie by singing Hit Me Baby One More Time. And it's like, I do really enjoy Britney Spears, so it's like, I think it's fun. I just, honestly, like, this whole month has just been, I just think it's neat. And that's just the whole thing about it. I just think vampires and werewolves and demons and ghosts and witches are neat. And I think that Halloween's just a fun time because we get to embrace this sort of spooky side of ourselves, you know? And yeah, I guess that's all I really have to say about that. Thank you everybody who stuck around through all 5 of these videos. I know that, like, 5 videos, each 20 minutes long, is a lot to get through, but, you know, I appreciate you guys sticking around if you did, you know, and, yeah, I guess that's the end of Monstober. So, tune in next time for when I have another video. I don't know when that video will be, because life is rough. I think the real monsters are the ones we have in our heads. And by that I mean, depression sucks, people. Anyways, this has been the Tiefling of Trouble, Jenny Blaze, and for the last time this October saying, shine on, ghoulies and ghoulettes!